Fantastic. Okay. So it's very timely that we're talking about that because I am in India at the moment. And I actually was up north until last week. I got a chance to spend some time in Kashmir again. And between Kashmir and, I mean, the Kashmir region in general and the state of Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh, those are some of my favorite places in India. And um, I got the chance to go to Ladakh back in July 2023. And when I think back about some of my favorite memories over the last few years, and when I think specifically about probably the most, if not, one of the top two or three motorcycle trips I've done, definitely one of them. And so I highly recommend it. I love it. I mean, I loved it. I love being there. And so let me try to give you the download about all of that. Okay, so number one, our intention. So I did the trip with Pablito, our mutual friend, and our plan was to basically go to Kashmir. And so I know you mentioned going to Ladakh, but if you get a chance to go to Kashmir as well, it will be a great place to visit. And I can definitely connect you to my friends over there, and you can have a very local experience. And so the plan, if you think about the north of India, there is basically the border with Pakistan on one side and China on the other side. And the Kashmir region is actually the most militarized region in the world. And so you might look at that and say, oh my God, it's a dangerous place, I don't want to go. But it's been an incredible place to travel to. And the same with Ladakh. If when you're traveling across this region, you see a lot of military presence. And so there is no active armed conflict happening now, but the armies of those countries have their armies deployed in the region that they control. And so it makes it that as you ride around, and I can share some photos, with military all around. I've been stopped by the military. There is, as you go through certain cities or towns, there is barricades in the corner of certain red lights. And so it's a very interesting and different place. The good thing about it is, it feels very safe. The bad thing about it is you never know. Things can happen at any time, and you can have these countries start something, but it's been over 10-15 years that there's been any kind of military engagement between them. So there is, I believe, a low probability of that happening when you're visiting. The other good thing that I like about it is when you're traveling in this part of the country, especially the Kashmir side, you don't see a lot of foreigners. You don't see a lot of tourists. You see mostly like local tourism from Indians. And that's actually one of my favorite things, like to be in these places where I get to discover this place and explore it, and where there isn't especially a touristic industry that's trying to sell you things. You can just be that fly on the wall and experience the place the way it is, and the way it is, as in like the way the locals live their lives, and they go on to their routine and they do their things, and they go places, and they go shopping, and they go to their job, and you get to be part of it, and that's really something I really enjoy. Okay, so and by the way, like the nature aspect over there is very unique. You're in the Himalayas. You have these huge mountains with snow on top. You have the best way that I can describe it. It just feels like Switzerland in a certain part of Kashmir. Like when you think about India, you don't imagine this, Swiss Alps kind of setting, but that's what it looks like when you go hiking there. And then when you go to Ladakh, it's drier. There is some certain desertic areas, yet you can ride around in a motorcycle, and as you mentioned, like you go through these passes, and you are at like, I think one of the passes at like 5,800 meters. That's almost as high as the Kilimanjaro. You are going up the mountains with a motorcycle, and it's this incredible views. And so definitely a very memorable trip. Okay, so let me talk a little bit about my plan, what my plan was, and what we ended up doing. And so initially the plan was to go to Kashmir, land in Srinagar, spend some time over there, rent a motorcycle, and then do a loop towards Ladakh, explore part of Ladakh, and then come back through Manali and Dharamshala and the southern part of that region and loop back into Srinagar. We had about a month and we had spent a bunch of time exploring Kashmir already. And what we decided to do for two reasons. Number one, because of the weather, we did this in July. And my recommendation to you, Marcelina, is to try to go there in that June, July, August timeframe if you want to do a lot of motorcycle riding because of the weather. It's probably okay a little bit earlier, it's probably okay a little bit after, but then definitely don't go with a plan to do a long motorcycle trip in the December, January, February timeframe just because it's a lot colder. And potentially you have more snow, slippery roads, so definitely would recommend it during the warmer months. And the thing is, there was going to be a bunch of rain in the south part of the road trip. And then when we looked at it, there were specific areas that we really wanted to spend time in. And there were just this long drive that we weren't especially excited about. So what we decided to do is to spend more time around Srinagar. And so what we did is we rented a motorcycle in Srinagar. And then we explored by motorcycle the region around. Specifically, we went to Gulmarg, which is a beautiful little town, a couple of hours, maybe like an hour to two away from the town. We went to Pahalgam, which is another town that's 2 hours away. And so we got to explore the region rather than do a big loop. Then we returned the motorcycle. We hopped on a flight, flew over to Leh, and flights within India are fairly cheap. I will say about $50 to $100. You can go to most parts of India in internal flights. And then once we landed in Leh, we spent some time there. We rented another motorcycle, and then we did another motorcycle loop. And we went to Pagong Lake and to Nubra Valley, and then came back, spent more time in Leh. And so that was the trip that we did. But there is definitely other parts of it, and depending on what kind of loop you do, you're probably looking at 1,000 to 2,000 kilometers, and there you can kind of imagine that that kind of distance. I would say you probably wanna count for maybe 1 to 2 weeks, depending on how small and how big of a loop you do and how many days you stop for. So as an example, you can definitely drive 4 or 5 hours every day. In the mountains, you're probably just covering 150 to 200 kilometers per day, and you can just go through it really fast. Or you can ride, for a couple of days, then you stop for a day or two, then you ride, you spend one night somewhere else, then you stop in another destination for 2-3 days, and you keep going, which is the way I think one should think about this kind of motorcycle trips. Any questions so far?
Wow, that was a lot of information. Yeah, I have a question. So, how to rent a motorbike? And because I know that the Indian brand Royal Enfield is very
Yep.
popular up there, but how to organize it?
Great question. So, the Royal Enfield is definitely the motorcycle I would recommend renting in India because it is fairly available. You find it in a lot of places, and it's a very durable, very comfortable bike to rent. For this kind of motorcycle trip, I would definitely recommend going for the Himalayan or the Scrum model. It's 411cc. That's the motorcycle that I rented for myself, both in Kashmir and in Ladakh. The cost was back in about a year and a half ago, was 1,500 rupees per day, which is about $17 per day. So that gives you a sense of how much it would cost. Specifically in Ladakh, there is a cooperative called the Ladakh Bike Rental Cooperative, and they will set the price. They have this price sheets for all the motorcycles, and all of the agencies that are part of this cooperative have to rent for a minimum of that price. So you can expect, and that was the price set for the bike that I was renting. And some agencies can charge you more, but you can negotiate and get that price fairly easily. My recommendation to you when to rent a motorcycle in India is to send a message to a bunch of agencies that you can look up on Google Maps and find the ones that are well rated, and then reach out to them via WhatsApp to acquire about a few things: pricing, deposits, and then potentially reserve a motorcycle for you. Don't stop there. This is India. India is a amazing but a very interesting place around commitment and around expectation and customer service, which means that even though you may reserve, I recommend you go in person the day before and potentially have option one and option two. So potentially have two potential service providers you may choose from. And so you can negotiate and agree on a price via WhatsApp, but you can, and or you can go in person and do it while there. So in both cases, I interacted with people via WhatsApp, but also just showed up and talked to people. And one of the things that I definitely want to recommend you do is check the bike you want to be riding. So ask if it's available, ask to see it, look at how many kilometers are on it, see what year it is, and then make sure that you test drive it, that it works really well, check the brakes, check the lights. And so you want to make sure that you're getting what you're expecting, especially if you're planning to go for a long motorcycle trip. You don't want to be riding for a couple of days and have the motorcycle fall apart on you. The other recommendation that I have is request a luggage rack and some ropes to attach it, as well as a phone holder that comes in handy. And so most of them have them there, or you make sure that you get one of those motorcycles that already have it set up. The other thing that comes in handy is asking for a jacket. So as an example, the place that we rented in Ladakh, they just gave us jackets free of charge. The owner was very nice. And sorry, one second. All right, we're back. We had a little bio slash technical break. Now the camera is up and running again. I got to turn off my AC for a second because it's been freezing here. And we continue where we left off.
Yeah, so we left on the highest road.
Yes.
And you gave me all tips how to get the best deal
Great.
on the motorbike.
So that would get you the motorbike. Let me think. Another thing to think about is it's better to travel with somebody. I think a lot of it is from a safety perspective. Not so I think it's a safe place to travel around. Like, people are not gonna bother you. The whole time we were there, we weren't stopped by the police, or it's not one of those countries where you get pulled over a lot. And India can be a very messy place when it comes to traffic. But when you're doing this motorcycle trip, maybe a little bit in Srinagar, in most of these places, you're in towns where there isn't a lot of traffic, there isn't a lot of people. There were days when I'm riding around and I don't see or come across anybody for half an hour or 1 hour. You just by yourself in the mountains, which means it's actually better and it's safer to be with somebody in case you have a mechanical problem. I don't know, you run out of gas, you have an accident, and you also have to remember that you're traveling at altitude. And so Leh, which is the main city in Ladakh, is at 3,500 meters, and you're going up to over 5,000 over 5,500 meters. And so it's good to, just from a health perspective, before you start a trip like that, get used to the altitude, and then as you ride around, be mindful of not traveling up really fast, because you can start having headache and you can have some altitude sickness.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you about this because obviously when you hike and you're on this altitude, there's a huge difference, right? And you need this time to accommodate into this. Obviously, I guess it's different walking and riding motorbike, but is this really, can you feel this difference, and does it affect how you feel riding,
Yeah,
or not too much?
the answer is absolutely, if you're not mindful. So as an example, you can go from Leh to the summit of the pass in 1 hour. But if you were hiking, let's say it may take you like 6 hours. And so you're going up in altitude little at a time, and and you're taking a few breaks. And so your body can get used to it. Now, when you're riding the motorcycle, you're gaining altitude much faster because you're covering more distance faster. And so the important tip in this case is to stop on a regular basis. So even though you can do it in 1 hour, my recommendation is you ride for 20-25 minutes, you stop, you can have a little chai, enjoy a little cup of tea, stop there for maybe 15-20 minutes, then ride again. That's especially true when you're going to the pass and you're climbing up the mountain really fast. But before starting the trip, for example, if you're in Ladakh and you get to Leh, let's say you fly to Leh and that's where you're gonna start your motorcycle trip, then spend a couple of days adjusting to the altitude first, and then once you feel comfortable, then start the trip. So if you fly from sea level to Leh and you get to 3,500 meters, and then you pick up the motorcycle the following morning and you take off and you're at over 5,000 meters, it's very risky, and you may get symptoms you might get headaches, nausea. You don't want to be in this kind of feeling when you're riding a motorcycle for hours at a time each day, and it can be very dangerous that way.
Okay, I think that's a very important part as well. And like you said, it's probably super important to have a partner, especially, yeah, not that somebody will rob you or something, but just for safety, because it's actually very empty. And I guess you mentioned as well that there's no signal, so whatever happens, it's just, yeah, it's like, outback in Australia, you don't go there, nothing will happen, but you can just break down and run out of water, and that's it.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, the one of the great things about this trip is you're disconnected. You are in nature. You have these incredible vistas, but yeah, as you said, there isn't signal in many places, and you have to rely on yourself and potentially your partners. One of the things that I know you asked me about is, do you go with an agency or do you go on your own? My preference is always to do it on my own if I can, because I like the flexibility of being able to make my own schedule. I can decide to spend more days in certain place if I like it. We can change routes, and I like that flexibility. And so what I did is I looked up a couple of agencies and I looked up what the price would be. So one of the things that we talked about is one option, and one common thing that people do is they either go to Leh and they will do a loop there that will go to Nubra Valley, Pagong Lake, and to Henley, and you can explore around that area. That's typically done. I looked up the option for one of the agencies. They do it in 7 days, which is 6 nights. And this agency has like a discounted rate for Indians, but for foreign nationals, they charge $800 for the 6 nights. And if you want to have your own room, you have to pay an extra $175. So let's say the trip for 7 days and 6 nights is about $1,000 USD. They also have another trip that they do, which starts further south in Manali, and then it makes its way towards Leh, and then explores the area around it, similar to this other loop that I talked about. And from there, they go to Srinagar, which is about another like 9-10 hours a drive between the two. And so this is a trip that they do in 11 nights or 12 days. And so the cost for this one, when you include the single occupancy, is about 1,800 USD. So when you divide it up, it's about $165 per night. That's the rate that they charge. $165 per night USD. That includes the motorcycle, having a guide / mechanic, and it includes breakfast and dinner. You still have to pay for your own gas. And there is extra tax on top to kind of keep in mind, which is 5%. If you were to do the same trip on your own, here is my estimate. To rent a motorcycle, it costs about, let's say we paid about $17, but let's put $20 there. So it costs about $20 per night every 24 hours. The cost of living in that area is not very high. You can probably have meals every day for about $15 per day. And then you can get your own accommodation, a comfortable, nice private room at a local bed and breakfast or small hotel for about $20 per night. And so let's add the gas on top. Let's say you need about $5 for gas. It's not that expensive in that part of India. And so you're looking at about $60 per night. So if you were to do a trip like this, for example, for 10 days, then you need about $600. Working with an agency will cost you, let's say, an extra $100 USD per day. So that's the difference between going on your own versus doing it with an agency. So a trip that might cost, $600 might be closer to $2,000 if you do it with an agency.
Yeah, perfect. Obviously, like I prefer to organize it myself as well. I mean, what's fun with going with agency? I don't know.
I mentioned it to you when we start talking. Number one, I can potentially connect you with a few friends who are into motorcycles who may be interested in that trip as well. You may also look for other people who may be wanting to do the trip in other groups, etc. It's definitely a very popular trip, especially amongst people in India. It's one of those things that's in their bucket list. Everybody in India dreams about doing a motorcycle trip in Ladakh, so you may be able to join a group of friends and travel with them. And then, or number two is I am happy to do the trip again. I had a great time, and we can potentially organize a group trip through SAFAROTO and get other people in the community who may be interested in joining us as well for the trip.
Yeah, that's perfect.
We'll just have to align the dates.